Welcome back to bettersociety.info. This is our 19th video in our regular series. The last one dealt with the American history during the period of time from 1607 up to right after the American Civil War. Now, what we're here for on all of these videos is that we're trying to better understand society. And we're trying to understand it in terms of the big picture of things. And so one of our challenges is that we often want to look at the things in our history to make us feel good. And if there's times in our history when it doesn't make us feel good, we don't study it, we don't have books about it, we even, sometimes deny that these things even happened. So the period of time after the American Civil War up until the 1950s is one of those periods. And there's some things during that period that we like a lot and we emphasize them. But there's other things about that period that we don't like about ourselves. And so we don't have any researchers looking at it. We don't have books written about it. If you go to an American university or even a large city library and look up the series of books where they deal with American history by dates and chronology order, there will be a lot of books about the American Civil War, a lot, and just rows and rows of them, and then all of a sudden there will be a lot of books having to do with the American West and about the rise of industrialization and building the railroads to the Pacific Ocean. But there will be very few books dealing with what went on in the American South after the Civil War. I was in a large city library here recently, and there were rows upon rows on the Civil War, and there's one little book dealing with the Reconstruction era. Just one little book, and it was a little thin book. And that was the only book. And yet there is a great deal that we need to understand about what went on during that time so that we don't repeat the same mistakes all over again. So the Civil War was fought through various different political processes. The 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendments were passed and put into the American Constitution. And for a brief period of time, we attempted, particularly with emphasis on black people, to free all of the slaves and make everyone a first-class citizen so that the black people would have the same citizenship status as what the Caucasian people had had all the way back to the Jamestown era. And that was done on a limited basis, but it had to be done on the basis of there being armies in the American South to enforce order and control the government. And so it worked for a while, but it had to be done with military force. And of course, people know that that's when the Ku Klux Klan came up. They carried out acts of terrorism. They did a number of different things in order to disrupt the economy of the South. And a lot of the natural products that were needed out of the South were needed by the North. And so eventually all of this terrorism wore down the North that wanted to have everybody be a first-class citizen. And this should sound really familiar to people today in the year 2000, 2008, during the time when we went to Iraq and we went to Afghanistan. I mean, you can win a war on the battlefield, but that's only half the issue. You have to also win the peace. And we're having a lot of trouble winning the peace in Afghanistan and Iraq, and we did not win the peace in the American South following the Civil War. Because U.S. Grant was president, and after he was president, his 8 years were over, there was a problem with who was going to be president. And because of all of the Ku Klux Klan terrorism that was going on, and how it negatively impacted the American economy, eventually a deal was struck that the Republican would get to be president as long as the Republican withdrew out of the South all of the military armies that had been there and keeping the rule of law in order through use of military forces. And so that was done. And so the brief attempt to make everybody a first-class citizen in the United States, Caucasians and blacks, didn't work, because the Supreme Court stopped enforcing the 13th, 14th, and the 15th Amendment as it would be enforced today. And we went back to a period of time of having blacks be involved in involuntary servitude in the American South. And that didn't start to change again until about the 1950s, when I was a teenager. So we have thousands of years in European history where most of the countries there had involuntary servitude. We had it here, and we attempted one time to make everybody be a first-class citizen. We failed. We won the battle on the battlefield in the Civil War, but we couldn't win the peace. And so it took another 100 years for us to really get serious again, to start trying to have a classless society. And that's been going on now for another 50 years or so, and it appears that this is going to work. But we need to understand that this is the first time it looks like it's going to work anywhere, because everything else in the past was mainly class-based societies. I mean, the Scandinavians didn't have a lot of involuntary servitude in their systems of government. But all over Europe, all over Asia, that was the case. So I would say that was pretty exciting, that in my lifetime we have been able to re-implement an effort to make everyone be a first-class citizen. And so we want to be sure to look at those things, look at how these changes took place, and apply those also into other places in the world. And we need to understand other places in the world and how their patterns of societies work if we're going to be successful in making the world a better place. So I'm going to sign off now, and we'll be back with our next video in a little bit.